11 players to stash before week 9. First guy we want to talk about here is Bhayshul Tuten. So he has showed up a few times in this video, but now coming out of his bye week, he's all the way down to 25% rostered. And you know our theory, if you've been listening to us on rookies coming out of their bye week, that's usually the time where they get a chance to get more involved in the offense and likely have a bigger role coming out of the bye. So I really hope that we see this from Bhayshul Tuten this week. He's super talented, really fast, and if all he needs is more of an opportunity to get on the field. So if he sees his touch share go up to that, from that 5 that we've been seeing roughly up to 10 or 12, it kind of cuts more into ETN's workload. I think we could see a changing of the guard here sooner than later this year, and he could be a major factor going down the stretch. ETN started really hot. He would looked really good, but he's kind of been tapering off too as the season has gone on. He's not nearly as effective as he was early in the year. So I really hope that we get more and more of Bhayshul Tuten starting in week 9 against the Raiders.
I think a lot of us thought that after the Bigsby trade that Tuten would be more involved in the offense, like right out of the gate. But, he hasn't been totally uninvolved, but like you said, he's only been averaging just over 5 touches per game. And I think the Jaguars overall are probably one of the more intriguing teams coming out of their bye, obviously specifically with Travis Hunter's involvement, but don't sleep on Tuten. And we know Liam Coen runs a very complex system, and maybe a week off is kind of just what they need for things to click further. And, going back to the pre-draft process, Tuten was not just a target of Liam Coen, but this is someone that their GM, James Gladstone, brought up multiple times in his interviews during the offseason for that role. So does that mean a whole lot at this point? Yeah, maybe not. We were all trying to make Jarquez Hunter a thing and Jalen Wright a thing last year for kind of the same reasons, but just something to keep in mind. And I think you hit the nail on the head with his explosiveness. He was a 4.32 guy. So if they can get him out in space and get his touches up to 8, maybe coming out of the bye, I think he can have a lot of value going forward. Next guy up, Isaiah Davis. So he has been a constant on this episode for, I think, 3 weeks now at this point, but we are less than a week away from the trade deadline. So I promise you, if Breece Hall has not been traded, that this is the last time you will see Isaiah Davis on this episode. We know Breece Hall is a free agent after this year, and the Jets are a complete dumpster fire. Braylon Allen is on IR. So unless the Jets are planning to extend Breece, not trading him would be a total mismanagement on the Jets' part, which would probably be a surprise to no one. But, Davis is coming off a really good game last week, 110 total yards. We know this game was against the Bengals and was a little bit weird, but I can't help but think this increased usage was maybe a little bit of a tryout. So at this point in the season, it's pretty rare for someone to back their way into a workhorse role without injury. And, that should absolutely be the case if, Breece Hall is gone. So Isaiah Davis, again, a very free stash at this point. If the trade deadline passes, you can just cut him unless, you have Hall and want to use him as a handcuff.
Yeah. And I think that's the easiest thing, right? He's even on bye too. So there's a chance that he comes available in your leagues as the week goes on. He's only 34% rostered, but this is a must add. If you have a spot and he's available in your league, this is the number one guy that I'd be going after. I have tried to scoop him up in every league that I'm in if he's out there. And like you said, if Breece Hall gets traded, he's going to go to 100% owned, and he's definitely somebody that you're going to be able to start moving forward. So you see this past week, he had a long run that really helped bolster his numbers, but even the 5 receptions, I think, was something that was really encouraging to see, that he's got passing game prowess. He can definitely be involved there to help raise his floor a little bit, even in weeks where the Jets have really bad offensive output. And, you see the 6'1", 220-pound size too. He is definitely a size profile that would fit with a workhorse running back, especially for only half a year. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting over my skis a little bit, but this feels like if Breece Hall gets traded, that this could be this year's Chase Brown, right? Chase Brown kind of got off to a slow start last year. Obviously, the Bengals are a really good offense, and he got all of the touches, but I definitely think that Isaiah Davis has some talent and can be involved in the passing game, and maybe he doesn't score a lot, so that's different than Brown, but top 20 running back, I think, is very much in his range of outcomes as long as Breece Hall gets traded. The next guy up is one of my guys, is Devin Neal. So we saw Kendre Miller go down for the season, And that left Devin Neal to kind of step up into that number 2 role in the backfield in New Orleans. So I was kind of expecting Devin Neal to be the number 2 out of camp, even over Kendre Miller when they initially drafted him. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition, and Kendre looked pretty good to start the year. New coaching staff, too, helped that a little bit with Kendre. And so, you see 13 and then 46% of the snaps for Devin Neal. And so did that turn into a lot of work? No, he barely touched the ball on the ground. Alvin Kamara has been atrocious the last couple of weeks as well, just in general. So hopefully we see the running game get going a little bit more in New Orleans. And who knows if that happens with the quarterback change with Tyler Shough. There just seems to be a lot of moving pieces here. But another thing that could happen is with the deadline here that Kamara could get traded. Now, I know he said he'd rather go, sip a drink on a beach somewhere rather than get traded, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it's still in the Saints' best interest to try and move him if they can get him on board with a move. So overall, Devin Neal, somebody that I think could end up having value in a situation where Alvin Kamara isn't on the team anymore. And at the very least, I think he's definitely the handcuff you want in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's interesting with Devin Neal because, if you guys followed a lot of the pre-draft stuff, he was kind of in the same conversations as like an RJ Harvey type where he was, a very solid player, a little bit of a sleeper. And obviously RJ Harvey's draft stock ended up being a little bit higher than maybe we would have expected. But, with Kendre Miller specifically, it was just so unfortunate to see him go down against the Bears against Dennis Allen, who just absolutely hates him, who called him injury prone, just truly unfortunate. But I think in this regard, not only is a handcuff, but it'll be interesting to see how much of a role he carves out because the Saints are very much in flux, obviously moving over to Tyler Shough. And I think, that just points to the fact that as okay as Rattler's played, they just kind of want to see what they have in the future. And I think if Neal's going to be part of that, then he's going to get at least a little bit of an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think he should be, right? I mean, he's 22 years old, good production out of Kansas, and I do think that this is somebody that could be with the team, at least through his rookie contract, right? Maybe it's not somebody that they end up using long-term or gets a big contract, anything like that. But I think, he could be with the team. The same way Kendre Miller is kind of stuck around with the team, even though he hadn't been playing well over his first couple of years. So definitely somebody to keep in mind. Even if you don't add, definitely keep him in mind as we move forward in the year.
Next guy up, Brandon Aiyuk. So he is 53% rostered. So, this is kind of just a double check. So if you are in a competitive league, he's probably been on someone's IR spot, likely since the draft. But, we've seen Aiyuk finish with 2 top 15 seasons out of his 3 healthy seasons. And I think with the Niners specifically, we don't know health-wise what they're going to look like at the end of the year. Could everyone be fully healthy and there's not enough targets to go around? Sure, maybe in that case, Purdy is someone you absolutely want on all your rosters. But, could there be new injuries that arise and Aiyuk be the clear number 1 in this offense? Yeah, that could happen as well. And I think the Niners defense are so injured that they're going to have to play in a lot of shootouts moving forward. And we talked about this a lot in the preseason where the Niners schedule was the easiest in the NFL coming into the year. So I think the stars are aligning and, we know the talent. So again, probably in shallower formats, but just double check with him. And on top of that, his fantasy playoff schedule is Tennessee, Indy, and Chicago. So we can be looking at some pretty easy matchups there at the end of the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. And something else to consider too ahead of the deadline is I've heard Juwan Jennings' name in trade rumors that they might end up dealing him for the right package. So before the deadline too, especially if you hear that Jennings is about to get traded or that Jennings does get traded and Aiyuk is available in your leagues, I think that's a good omen for his health. And, Jennings has been having his own injury concerns already, just trying to battle through whatever. And Pearsall's out with PCL injuries still too. So Aiyuk could come back to just an absolutely awesome situation with Purdy returning. And then he just gets to step right back in as the number 1 wide receiver in the offense. So definitely somebody that I'd be looking to add if he's available in any of your leagues. The next guy up is Cedric Tillman. So this is somebody that we were both pretty excited about in the preseason and a big reason why we kind of buried Jerry Jeudy in our rankings. But, he got hurt and has been out for a big majority of the season, but he's expected back after the bye week now in week 10. So he's somebody that you can stash in an IR spot if you have one open. over the weekend for week 9. And then as part of the week 10 prep, you can make an evaluation at that point on whether or not you want to keep Tillman on your rosters. So he gets the Jets coming out of the bye in week 9. And I do think that this is somebody who overall has showed that he can make an impact. He's good in the red zone. Will Dylan Gabriel be able to get him the ball? I think that's the biggest question mark around him. Cleveland's passing game offense has been pretty bad outside of the tight ends, but I think he's worth checking in on if you have a roster spot.
Yeah, and with Judy specifically, you mentioned bearing him in the rankings. I think we ended up with him as like wide receiver 40 or something going into the year. And the whole argument we were trying to make was when he and Tillman have shared the field together, like Tillman has basically out-targeted him. And with the landscape of the team, like Isaiah Bond has stepped in, but he hasn't really done anything with his opportunities. And a lot of that is quarterback play. A lot of it's the fact that, most of the targets have been going to the tight ends anyways. But this isn't a take of, do I think Tillman's going to come back and be like a weekly starter? I just think there's so much in flux with Cleveland right now. Like we could see Njoku get traded at the deadline, maybe Judy gets traded at the deadline. I don't really know what his value is at this point, but, if Shedeur steps in and, Gabriel is clearly not an NFL quality starting quarterback. So there's enough to at least stash him and just kind of see how it all shakes out because, you and I are in the camp that he's a very talented player and that's kind of the type of guy that you want to target.
Yeah. And it's not like Jerry Jeudy without him has been, doing great either. I mean, he literally had a goose egg last week. So if they were looking to trade him, that's a great way to have him play his last game is like just 0 points. So, I think Tillman hopefully will provide some juice in this wide receiver room. Like, Jabari Thrash is not it. Isaiah Bond doesn't seem to be ready. Jerry Jeudy has not been good. So it's been a lot of Fannin. It's been a lot of Njoku. And when Tillman's back, hopefully he can assume the role as the number one.
Next up, Tory Horton, one of my guys here. Seattle's second to last in the NFL in 3 wide receiver sets, only to the Steelers, which is kind of why you see the really low snap shares for Horton. But, I don't necessarily think that coming out of their bye that they're all of a sudden going to be living in 11 personnel. But I think the take here is that, maybe we see him start to eat more into Cooper Kupp's role. Like Cooper Kupp has totaled 4 targets over the last 2 weeks, despite being on the field for more than 70% of the snaps. Kupp's had an awesome career, but I'm not necessarily sure he still has it. And Horton has showed some decent promise and limited opportunities. Like he's been efficient with his targets. He scored 3 touchdowns through the air. He's been really good as a punt returner. So, I know he wasn't necessarily the highest draft pick being in the 5th round, but he was a small school guy coming off a major knee injury, but very explosive, very talented. This is someone that not myself, but I've heard people compare to Justin Jefferson. So I think if he starts to eat into Cooper Kupp's role, we know how well Darnold's playing. Obviously, JSN's still the guy over there. But again, sticking with the theme of wanting to target rookies coming out of their bye, this is the type of talented player that I think is worth a stash.
Yeah, and I wish that they just give him the opportunity to play in 2 wide receiver sets, make Cooper Kupp the slot guy and the 3 wide receiver set guy.
Yeah,
and
Kupp's the slot guy
great.
Anyway. Right?
Yeah, like Kupp's in the slot. It just would make a lot of sense if they just changed their roles. And I think Kupp even could be more effective on less targets at his age and with how he's been performing. So this is one of the things where maybe we're hoping or praying or banking on it, but he does have 3 touchdowns early. He didn't have a catch in his last 2 weeks going into the bye, but really talented player. I know he's a 5th round pick, but honestly, I think all of us expected him to go ahead of that. And like you said, Darnold's playing great, and JSN has basically been the only game in town on this offense. So if they do give him a bigger opportunity, maybe there's a chance that he can kind of work his way into a 6 target a game type of role and a touchdown every 2nd, 3rd game type of thing. So I like the Tory Horton call, and we were talking about him in Dynasty. This is absolutely somebody that we're very excited about in Dynasty because Cooper Kupp's not going to be with the team next year. If they don't address the receiver position, he is going to be absolutely a smash spot with Darnold and JSN.
Offer a trade for him in Dynasty. Don't overpay, don't get crazy, but just do something to get him on your rosters in Dynasty.
Yeah, and just, sell bye week, multiple games with no catches or anything. See if you can really get him on the cheap this week in Dynasty. And the last guy we're going to talk about here is Christian Watson from the receiver position. So, comes off IR, I think, way earlier than any of us expected, right? He had a week 18 ACL tear, and he's out there in week 8. Like, he beat Aiyuk back, and I know Aiyuk had more ligament damage than just the ACL, but it was awesome to see Watson back out there this quickly. And he only played 56% of the snaps, which is kind of just in line with the workload that we would maybe expect from him anyways. And right back to his down the field role, 4 catches, 85 yards. And this game made me super nervous about Matthew Golden for the rest of the year. I was just like, oh, no. That was supposed to be what Golden was able to do well, and then with an opportunity to move into more work. But Golden basically did nothing, and Watson was the one playing on the outside and down the field. So overall, I think if he has another game like this, or God forbid he catches like a 60-yard touchdown on top of this type of performance, and then he's at 4 or 5 for 120 and a touchdown, you're not going to be able to get him for less than double-digit fab. So go out and get Watson onto your teams now before it's too late.
Yeah, and this feels one of those guys where we don't necessarily make these call outs in terms of like guys that we think can be viable trade candidates. But if he goes off against Carolina, which he's more than capable of, depending on if he gets involved early before they start running the ball, if they're up big, he feels like someone that you can definitely flip, because you can sell the fact like, hey, his snap share has increased, he's explosive. Then maybe you show him his North Dakota State highlights just as a kicker. He feels like someone that you can flip into a valuable asset long term. And it's not like he's not going to have long term value. It's just the Packers receivers are so frustrating to deal with on a week to week basis. So if he goes off here and he's on your bench, and you're in a league that actively trades, he would be someone that I would be trying to sell off a big game, should that.
Yeah, and the other thing too that you could consider is, even if he's not the one that you can sell, if you have a wide receiver 3 that you're not thrilled with, but that has good name value, or you have a Brian Thomas Jr. who maybe somebody in your league has been trying to trade for, and then you have a Christian Watson who is coming off of 2 pretty good games, maybe you could end up making a move because you feel better about your wide receiver room in general. So overall, Christian Watson, definitely somebody that you and I are both excited about, just mainly because we've always loved the player, and seeing him come back this quickly, perform this well right off the bat, I think has got us a little bit excited. So go get Watson if he's out there.
So first defense here, we've got the Cleveland Browns. So 6 sacks last week, 5 of which were from Myles Garrett, which was insane, and 4 sacks the week prior. And, they get the Jets in week 10, and, Justin Fields, if he is the starter, is 4th in the NFL in sacks taken. And, he's even missed a game and a half. And should it be Tyrod Taylor? Like, he's been sacked 9 times in his limited sample size this year. He's also turned the ball over 4 times. So, and at this point, Breece Hall might not even be a Jet. So I think this is one where we're just targeting a good aggressive defense against a team that might be a little bit down in the dumps at this point. So the fact that they're only 23% rostered might even go down lower. As teams start to cut their, bye week defenses and make moves before Sunday's games kick off. But this one just feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to set the over-under at for sacks? Like 6.5 against, if it's Justin Fields? It just feels like it's a lot for them to be all over whoever the quarterback is. So
right, and they also have a great run defense too. And it's like, okay, if Garrett Wilson's back, like he goes for 95 yards, that's great. You can still score 14 points against that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love the Browns call. Definitely think that they're worth stashing through the bye. There's a lot of defenses that are going to be good for week 10 as well. So Cleveland Browns, definitely, if you can get out in front of it, they're the best ones in our opinion. Next team is on the other side of that game is the Jets. So they're going to be playing against Cleveland. And if it's still Gabriel and, maybe Tillman's back, but we could be seeing something different if Njoku is gone and maybe Judy gets traded, something like that. Where Cleveland is just not going to be in a good spot. If Quinshaw Judkins is still out too, they're going to be leaning on Dylan Sampson and or Jerome Ford in the backfield. So they could be pretty decimated in this matchup with the Jets. And obviously the Jets have been very bad on defense. They're the 28th ranked fantasy defense so far this year. So I get it. If you don't want to pick them up, that's totally fine. I just think that the matchup in the situation for week 10 specifically can be really good for them. And they're only 3% rostered. So they're out there in all leagues.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if they. I don't really know the extent of Shadur's injury, but I just have a hard time believing if he's available that they're going to continue to roll with Gabriel. And like, Gabriel was good at Oklahoma, or well, he was okay at Oklahoma. He was good at Oregon, and he's been kind of a journeyman. And my thought process during his whole college football career was like, oh, he should just go to Miami and back up Tua. But maybe you don't want two guys that are completely horrible with no arms. But I digress. The point being is, if it's Gabriel, we know he's good for a pick or two. And, we are dumpster diving here at 3%. All right. So speaking of dumpster diving, we've got the Carolina Panthers defense here. So this is for our very deep league audience. So they do get the
Another
Saints.
3% rostered here. You can't say that we don't go deep enough for you guys. So.
Yes. So in a 24-team league, superflex with 2 defenses and 6 flex spots, we've got the defense for you. However, they do get the Saints, and we saw a glimpse of Tyler Shough, and I do commend the Saints for at least saying, we have to know what we have out of this guy, right? Like, he's 26 years old as a rookie or something absolutely absurd. So I get it. Like, Rattlers played admirably, but he was still a 5th round pick. So if Shough is just horrible this week and he's turning the ball over even more, I do think there's a chance for, Carolina to be effective. And, we've seen, was that week 3 against Atlanta where they just kind of went off. So we've seen this over a couple of years where Carolina's defense, like, once in a while will just like completely wake up. But again, this one is very deep league, and we'll see how Shough looks this week. But there's also a chance that I kind of hope they trade Olave, but there's a chance that Shaheed gets traded too, and they're just decimated.
Yeah. And if Kamara's gone too, or, we might just be seeing a wildly different New Orleans team. So again, if you need a defense and you're in a deep league and most of the defenses are gone, or that you got guys that carry multiple, this is a defense that I think you can get on your team, so you don't have to spend any fab or anything like that on a defense for week 10. So overall, Panthers obviously not the greatest defense, but they did just put up a good total against the Jets 2 weeks ago. So I think they've shown that they can at least do okay when they pick their spots against bad teams. So, you're not going to be starting them against New England or Buffalo, and you're not scared of them when they're on the schedule. But I do think that they're at least somewhat decent enough to be able to handle themselves against the Saints. So if you're really stuck or you want to get ahead and you're in a team and you're in a league, 12-team league, 14-team league that rosters a bunch of defenses, this is one that should be out there for you. All right. And so for our Superflex League audience, we've talked about this guy a little bit and kind of talked down on him, is Tyler Shough. So I do think, like you said, we got to see a little bit of him last week. Nothing really that inspired, but I think, again, in Superflex, quarterbacks should pretty much just be owned. So overall, Rams, Carolina, and then a bye, that is a brutal schedule. So if you're picking him up, the chances that you're even looking to play him are not for a month out. Even Atlanta is a pretty tough matchup, even though they kind of are up and down and one of the hardest teams to predict week to week. So you might be looking at week 13 before you'd even consider putting him in your lineup. But it's one of those things where when it's a rookie, 2nd round pick, maybe he's just better than we expect. And if they do end up keeping Olave, keeping Juwan Johnson, keeping Alvin Kamara, the weapons around him should be serviceable enough to kind of give him a legitimate look at being an NFL quarterback. So overall, not super inspired, but definitely somebody that if he didn't get added in your leagues, you're going to want to add, because if he looks decent against the Rams, he's going to end up getting added in your Superflex leagues. And
this is why Superflex is just the best, right? Like, we would never be talking about this guy. And we had talked about this in our 1 QB leagues where it's like, this guy's on the wire, this guy's in the wire. No, like in Superflex, like it gets a little bit crazy. And Shough has a big arm, right? Like, and I think the fact that he's definitely going to be playing for his job, because the Saints are going to be in the position to take a quarterback in the 1st round next year. So maybe he's going to be playing with nothing to lose. And I like Kellen Moore. So.
Yeah. Not expecting much here. Just somebody that you want to put on your roster and get ahead of, possibly if somebody in your league has quarterback troubles, or if you're having quarterback troubles, it's just somebody to check in on, just making sure that we note that he did come available and he is going to start for them and likely for the rest of the year. All right. And with that, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you in the next one.